Hello and thank you for coming to check this out. This is going to be a short guide just to show you how you can get this animation with the object jumping with the matching shadow. I will just show you the basic setup, and I think once you know those steps you will be able to do a lot of different things with it. Here in the layers panel you can see that this is all done completely with Motion 5 behaviors. It's just two specific behaviors, the logarithmic and the exponential. There's one use of the ramp behavior here in the beginning to scale everything in. And as far as behaviors compared to keyframing goes, I think with the ramp it's the only option that maybe keyframing would give you more choices and maybe do it better for the scaling. But for everything else, and I've tried with keyframing, just at my skill level with keyframing, nothing could match parameter behaviors to get the smoothness of the animations that I was looking for. So for making objects jump in Motion 5, there's so many different options. You can use the oscillate behaviors, there's gravity simulations with the edge collision, but for the thing that I had in mind, this was the best solution that I've found so far. I've been working on it for a while. And this build is very versatile. It works with titles as well when you run it through a sequence text. So I think once you know these steps, you will be able to work that out from there as well. Okay, let's get into the project and see how this is all done. This project is at 1920 by 1080 and it's at 30 frames a second. The frame rate is quite important here because I'll be doing everything within 1 second intervals and I'll be judging everything by 30 frames. I have the duration at 20 seconds just to give you lots of room to play around once you've got the first one done. So I'm starting with just a white color solid for a background, and I have this text object here. It's an exclamation mark from the Gotham font. If you don't have this font in your font book, there is a link in the description. You can go to a website that will give you a free version. Otherwise, any font that you like. I like a font that has good chunky width to it. So it's set to ultra and the size is 450. It's sitting at 0 on the x-axis and we're at minus 300 on the y-axis to give us lots of room to jump. And note that the anchor point is at the bottom and in the middle. So the first thing that I'm going to do with this is trim the endpoint. I'm going to move the playhead to 10 frames and hit I on the keyboard to trim it there. The initial jump in is 20 frames and then everything after that is 30 frames per movement. Okay, so let's add the first half of the jump. In the properties here with the y-axis, I'm going to add a parameter behavior logarithmic. I'll set the end value at 300. So you can see there's a curve that's been placed in the keyframe editor here. The end value is way over here. We need to bring it back. So this project is 20 seconds at 30 frames a second. It's 600 frames, and when we talk about end offset here, when we work with parameter behaviors, the start offset works forward from the first frame, but the end offset works back. So I'm going to pull this end offset back to meet the playhead at 20 frames, so the jump up is 10 frames long. So you'll see if I bring this slider back to meet the playhead, so you see we're 20 frames in and that value here, well I'll just make it exact, will be 580. So when we talk about end offsets we count backwards, so it's 600 minus 20 frames gives us the end value. Okay, so that's the jump up, and now we're going to add another parameter behavior to give us the motion down. So I'll come back to that y-axis and add another parameter behavior, exponential. And see, our end value for the way up is 300, so I want the end value for the exponential to be the exact opposite so that it comes down to the same place. So I'm going to add minus 300. So you can see over here that's given us this curve that will bring the object down. Now I'm going to bring this endpoint end condition forward in time to meet the playhead at 30 frames. So I can do that in here directly by adding 570 as the value. So there's our first animation in, but now we want to add the scale. So I'll come into Properties and grab the scale, add parameter behavior. I'm going to use ramp. I'll bring the playhead to 1 second, 30 frames, and trim ramp to end there. And I'll have the start value at minus 100. Okay, that's the first step done. Now we can animate the rest of the jumping action. First of all, I'm going to start labeling these behaviors. Makes it easy to keep track of things later on. Right, so at 1 second, the object has jumped in, and right here we want it to squash down to set up the jump. So we're going to do that by using the logarithmic behavior again. This time we're going to apply it to scale. So remember, our anchor point is down here, so when we decrease the scale it's going to squash in from the top toward where the anchor point is. So I'll grab the Y scale and add logarithmic parameter behavior, and I'm going to shift it forward in the timeline to begin at 1 second, and I'm going to bring the playhead forward 10 frames to 1 second 10 frames and trim it. So this action is 10 frames long. I'm going to name it as squash 1 and give it an end value of minus 40. Okay, so you can see here that when the squashing behavior finishes in the timeline, the scale snaps back, which is something we use to sell the effect of the jump happening. So what we're going to do now is grab our first jump behavior, duplicate it, I'll rename it jump 2, and I'm going to use shift left bracket to bring it to start when the object snaps back. Then with the playhead at 1 second and 20 frames, I'll grab the exponential parameter behavior, duplicate that, rename it, and again Using shift left bracket, I'm going to move the endpoint so that it takes over there. So now note that there's that slight hang. So to fix that, if you see the curve here, it's flattening up here. Right, okay, so first of all, we want this end condition to be exactly 2 seconds, so we're going to come into the layers panel here and adjust the end condition. And I'll enter an exact value just to make sure that it's clean. Okay, that's a good start. So now at 2 seconds, we want it to squash again. So I will grab squash 1, duplicate it, shift left bracket, rename it, squash 2. Let's move the outrange a bit. And it's snapping back again, and then we can repeat these steps. So let's do one more. I'm going to grab jump 2, duplicate it, shift left bracket to bring it to start when it snaps back. And then with the playhead at 2 seconds 20 frames, I'll grab down 2, duplicate that, use the same hotkeys to move it forward. So let's see what we have. We see that with this last animation we did, it's not as smooth, it comes up and hangs a bit. So what we'll do is bring the playhead back 1 frame. I'll use I on my keyboard with down 2 selected actually, and need to rename these guys as jump 3 and down 3. Okay, so with down 3 selected, I'll hit I on my keyboard to bring it forward 1 frame. Then I'll come to down 3 in the layers panel, and I'm going to nudge the start offset toward the logarithmic. And you can see here that if you do it right, you're sort of going to smush the meeting point together, which will smooth out the animation. So remember that when you string many of these together, that little trick there will help you ease your frustration. We could do it again here with this one as well. And so on we go. So what I will do is leave you with that. I'm going to stop now and we'll reset and go back and look at how we do the shadow. I'm going to make a new group and call that group shadow, and then I'll come and grab the circle tool and draw a circle in there. I'll name it as shadow, and I'm going to give it a black fill, and on the group I'm going to add a blur filter. Gaussian blur, and I'll have it set to 10. Okay, so what we want to do is link the width of this shape to the Y position of the jumping object. So I'm going to come into select the shadow shape, come into properties, come and grab scale X and add a parameter behavior link, and as the source we'll add the jumping object, and we're going to choose object properties transform position Y. So we're getting a interaction here, and what we want to do now is adjust this Y offset here. So a couple of things to do first. Let's just turn off the link and select the shadow. I still haven't really found the ideal way to do this, but I'll show you what I've come up with so far. So we're going to select this object here, option, and adjust this circle shape so that it lies flat. It'll help sell the idea that it's a shadow a bit more. Okay, I'll turn the link back on. I'll turn off. Have I got it set to the right thing? Link, position Y to scale X. Yes. Okay, so I'll just come forward to when it lands. Right, so I'm going to, with the object landing at 2 seconds there, I'm going to adjust this Y offset slider. Let's move the shadow over. So in the link setting here with the object landed, adjust the Y offset until it kind of matches the width of the text element, and then we're pretty much good to go. As I said, it's not perfect, it's the best solution I've found so far. So let's move it up on the Y-axis to sit under the object at -299, and of course we want it to sit under the text element itself. So that's how we set the shadow up. Well, that's it. That's all I want to show you now. I think now that you know those steps, you should be able to do lots of things. What I'll do is leave you with that, but I'm going to come back in with the full project that I completed, and if you want to keep watching, I'll show you some other tips, and I'll show you how I got the shadow to animate in the beginning, and there's also something you might want to know for having it animate out if you want this fella to jump off the screen. Okay, so I'll see you back here. Here is the test project that I finished and posted the other day. So let's have a look at a few more ideas to help sell the animation. So first of all, let's have a look at the jump in. If you look down here in the keyframe editor, you'll see that it's, or here, this line here is Y minus 300. Here, here, and here, that's where the object's are coming down to and then jumping from. But you can see it dips here in the beginning. So this is the logarithmic behavior to jump it in, and I've set it with a start value of -800 so that it just adds a bit more flair to the animation from the start. Then I think you can see that with each jump, the end value is just increased a bit. We've gone from up one 300, 400, 500, and then the last one, it's just clearing the canvas. This one here, it happens very fast. Right. Also, you can see that for each of the, where's the squash? For each of the squash behaviors, the value is increasing. The last one here is minus 90. So just to try and sell the idea that each jump is gaining more strength, more momentum, to jump it out. These last two here, if you can see, they're kind of jumping in on an angle. We get that just by, I showed you before, the anchor point is set down here and in the middle, but if you just set it a little bit to either side, then it's going to push the animation out to the side as it jumps in. But you can't do it too much, otherwise it will kind of fling the object off the canvas. Okay, now the shadows. When I said before that I only keyframed, that the only place keyframing might be better would be the ramp to scale it in, actually that was incorrect, because I have, let's find the shadow. The blur, the Gaussian blur, I have keyframed that, if you can see up here. I have it at 10% when it's landing, and as it reaches the peak of the jump, it's going to 20, and then coming back to 10. So we're setting keyframes to hold it at 10 until it jumps again, and then for the higher jump, a little bit more, back to 10. For the next higher jump, a little bit more, just to try and again sell the animation a little bit more. And the shadow animating out here, you can see that actually it's another circle altogether. That's why before I put the Gaussian blur on the group, so that every shadow we put in there will be influenced by the blur. Here, the first shadow finishes right here in the timeline, and the next shadow takes over. So the next shadow is just, it's not the link is not there. I took the link off and I just ramped the scale, not the width. I ramped the scale to hit 0 as the shape goes out. The reason for that is when the width, with the shadow that we linked with the width, when the width hits 0, it kind of squashes up and it just doesn't look right. So far my workaround for that, until I find a better solution, my workaround is just to have another shape take over. You see they're swapping over here when the shape is landed, so one comes in, or one goes out, the other one sneaks in, and then I think the animation sells okay. So the shadow at the very beginning, all that's happening here is that I have, did I keyframe again? Either keyframe or ramp, just control the movement from about where, you can see it just comes in here. I've just animated the scale and the position. Let's grab that shadow in. Okay, in properties, right, you can see the Y position. Okay, I have used keyframes here, but here you could do them with ramp. That's fine. behaviors are a good substitute here. So you can see it's the scale and the position. It's just, let's see, if I was to just reset the scale. Okay, there you go. So it's just moving back and forward a little bit. And yeah, that's that. So it scales up to its size and just moves slightly up and down the y-axis to kind of sell the idea that it's following the object jumping in. So that's about it. I'm sure that from here you will do lots of different things, and if you would like to, please share what you do with this. I'd be really interested to see. I'll just finish by showing you a couple of other things that I've done with it. Right, so I've used the same behaviors with this flat square shape. And I've added the rotation there as well. Just trying to work out an idea that I have in my head. And this little project here, this is kind of the whole point of, I have something in mind for these. This is the whole point, that I wanted to find a good way to make objects jump. I've added an overshoot to the end, just to give it that bounce. Okay, there you go. Sorry, it ended up being quite a long guide, but if you're stuck around and you're still watching, thanks, I really appreciate it. I hope that you learned something useful here. And as I said before, you can take... Okay, one more thing to finish on. Note that we were using a text object for the item, and naturally, being a text object, you could run all of these through sequence text and it will work. The reason I didn't do it here is because, now I don't know why, but the shadow will not link properly if it's through sequence text. So I'm trying to find out why. It might just be a lack of knowledge, or it might just be the way things are. If you know, please give me a shout. So with titles, with text, if you run these behaviors through sequence text, you get a pretty good result. I posted a test project, the results of that, on the channel. It's called Jumping Titles, if you want to go and check it out. Okay, so that's that. Again, thanks for watching. I hope that this has been useful.